Hi, Founder fans. Jason here, and today's founder is Gaylord Griswold, the drafter of the 12th Amendment. Now, Griswold comes from the Griswold family of Connecticut, and if that doesn't mean a whole lot to you, that makes sense, because it didn't mean a whole ton to me when I first read it, although I knew there was a Fort Griswold, which had a massacre in the Revolutionary War, but that's not what I found out when I dug in a little deeper. The Griswold family of Connecticut actually is a very large family that ends up being more than Connecticut by the end of the Revolutionary War. They are in various politics in various states and end up becoming better known in the iron industry in the years following the American founding leading up to the Civil War. But as for Gaylord, he is one of these people from Connecticut who leave to the surrounding area. In fact, he came of age just as the Revolutionary War was ending, and he studies law at Yale before opening a practice in Connecticut. But shortly thereafter, he ends up moving to upstate New York, Herkimer in particular, and while he's there, he ends up becoming a lawyer on what was essentially the frontier at the time. The frontier, of course, in New York was growing at this time, and he was more in Oneida territory, which were more friendly to the Patriots during the Revolutionary War. They were the part of the Iroquois nation with the Tuscarora that hung around with the Americans as opposed to the rest of the Iroquois that hung out with the British. But since the rest of the Iroquois were pretty much leaving the area at this point due to treaty negotiations and being on the losing side of a war, the frontier was expanding, and it was a great opportunity for a young lawyer to go make his name. And Gaylord did just that. In fact, he was elected to the New York State Assembly just before he even reached the age of 30. Now, a decade after that, approaching mid 30s, Gaylord was actually elected to the United States House of Representatives, and this is where he makes his name. Now, he shows up in 1803, and I want a side note here. I read a description of him in a letter from DeWitt Clinton to President Thomas Jefferson. DeWitt Clinton was telling Jefferson about all the new people who were elected from New York State, and he describes Gaylord, along with one other person, as, quote, where was the quote, bitter and weak. Now, Gaylord was a Federalist, and as one Democratic Republican writing to another one, he probably wasn't talking about him in general as a character. He probably meant his political stylings or political abilities at that point, if you will. Again, he was still a fairly young man, and the Federalists could be bitter at this point because the Jeffersonians had pretty much cleaned house throughout most of Congress and obviously the presidency. So, Gaylord comes in this scenario. Now, we are just a few years removed from Jefferson and Aaron Burr, even though they ran together, having a little bit of a tie there during the election of 1800. And before that, you have Adams and Jefferson from two political factions as president and vice president. So everyone had kind of figured out at this point that certain changes definitely needed to be made, that this was a system that could not continue without certain hostilities arising. And when Gaylord shows up as part of the minority party, he does want to participate, and he is given the task of drafting what would later become known as the 12th Amendment. Now, we do want to be fair that after it was drafted, it went to committee. He was part of the committee that drafted it, went to committee, they reviewed it, it went to Congress, who debated it and picked it apart. Then it had to go to all the states for ratification. So we can't really give Gaylord Griswold all the credit for the 12th Amendment, but he is the one who wrote the original draft, and to a large degree, that language still remained. It went to the states after going through Congress, came back and was ratified. And that essentially is Gaylord's small mark on history. Now, he's only in the House of Representatives for one session. He's there for 2 years, and he goes back home to Herkimer County, goes back to private practice. Now, he does end up writing a letter that it was circulated between the Federalists at first. And what was going on is, well, former vice president, well, I should say current vice president, yet to be in a duel with Hamilton, Aaron Burr, was now running for governor of New York. Again, George Clinton, DeWitt's uncle, was replacing him as vice president with Thomas Jefferson. So Burr thought he'd take George Clinton's job, and he was running against Morgan Lewis. Now, what's really interesting about this scenario is technically they were both Democratic Republicans. You have two Democratic Republicans running for, I did not mean to say president, governor of New York. Now, Gaylord Griswold writes a letter at this point saying, hey, Federalists, we should probably support Aaron Burr because there's a better chance of us remaining a real party in New York. New York had been a swing state throughout the Revolutionary era up till this point. And now it seems like it was getting taken over by Democratic Republicans. And if Federalists wanted to remain a party in that state, he thought the best bet was to vote for Aaron Burr. Now, this is several years after Alexander Hamilton chooses Thomas Jefferson over Aaron Burr. So Burr not super excited about the Federalists in general, but Burr did want to win all the votes for the election he possibly could, and this included the Federalists. So Griswold makes this recommendation. The Federalists do seem to support Aaron Burr, but it doesn't matter because Morgan Lewis wins and Aaron Burr gets in a duel, which doesn't help things, and he runs away. Unfortunately for Griswold, is this letter, which was supposed to be more or less an internal memo for Federalists in the state, it gets published, and it kind of goes, I don't want to say viral, but enough people read it, and it's looked on by most Democratic Republicans who have really, again, taken over the lead. From this point forward, the Federalist Party dies out, and there's only one political party for a long time. And it will be for about 20 years until the Democratic Republican Party factions itself. However, Griswold's letter is one of those milestones in a long train of milestones that tear the Federalist Party apart. The Democratic Republicans look at the Federalist Party and they say, look at this. They're supporting Aaron Burr of all people. And it does not go all that swimmingly. It essentially ends Griswold's national career. But the real sad part is Griswold ends up passing away kind of suddenly for reasons I'm unable to determine in 1809. When he is just 41 years old. So he's still a very young man, having done all this, especially, as I said, accomplishing something fairly incredible, which was writing the first draft of the 12th Amendment. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, definitely hit like, subscribe if you're new here. I put out videos all week long about the American Revolution. For example, I'll be back with another founder for you tomorrow.